The accusation in the market. The sun was hot above the crowded market. The smell of bread and spices filled the air. Vendors shouted their prices. Children ran between the stalls, and people bargained loudly. It was a normal day, but under that noise something darker began. Near a fruit stall stood a small alien girl, her skin pale with a faint shimmer, her clothes torn, her eyes big and nervous. She looked too thin, too weak. She stretched her hand slowly toward a basket of apples. Her fingers touched one, but before she could hold it, a loud voice cut the air. "Thief!" the vendor shouted, pointing at her with anger. The crowd turned, eyes narrowed. Some gasped, some laughed. Others shouted, "Catch her, she is stealing again." The alien girl froze, her hands shaking. The apple fell back into the basket, but no one cared. They saw only a thief. The vendor grabbed her wrist, his grip rough. The girl cried out softly but did not fight. The people gathered closer, words filled with hate. "These aliens always steal. They have no honor. Throw her out. Punish her." In the middle of that noise, one human stood watching. His name was Daniel. He was not rich, not powerful, just a man who worked cleaning machines near the market. He carried tools and smelled of oil. He saw the girl's eyes wide with fear, full of shame, and something inside him felt wrong. "Wait," Daniel said, his voice calm but firm. "Did anyone see her steal? Did she hide food? Did she run?" The crowd turned on him, surprised, angry. "She had her hand on the apple," someone shouted. "What more proof do you need?" Another yelled, "These creatures lie. She will take everything if we let her." Daniel stepped closer, the alien girl's wrist still trapped in the vendor's hand, her shoulders trembling. "Being hungry is not the same as being a thief," Daniel said slowly. "All of you are judging without knowing." The vendor's face turned red. "Are you blind? She is caught in the act." He shouted, "Why defend her? What is she to you?" The people murmured, suspicion growing. Some whispered that Daniel must be protecting her for secret reasons. Some spat on the ground near his feet. The alien girl lowered her head, silent, too scared to speak. Daniel looked at her closely, her lips dry, her stomach pressing against her ribs, her whole body weak. He remembered the nights he had gone hungry as a boy. He remembered stealing a small loaf once, and how guilty he had felt. He saw the same pain in her eyes now. "She is just hungry," he said, louder this time, his voice cutting through the market noise. "You call her a thief, but what would you do if your child was starving? Would you not reach out for food?" The market fell quiet for a moment, his words heavy, but then laughter broke out, cruel and sharp. "You sound like a fool," someone jeered. "Maybe you should feed her then if you care so much." Daniel stood tall even as people mocked. "Maybe I will," he answered, "but I will not stand here and let you break her for wanting to live." The vendor released the girl's wrist with a shove. She stumbled, nearly falling. Daniel caught her arm gently. She looked up at him, her eyes wet, shining with something between fear and hope. The crowd dispersed slowly, muttering, some shaking their heads, others glaring at Daniel. Whispers spread through the market. "He defends thieves. He sides with aliens?" The words carried venom. Daniel guided the girl to the side of the road, away from the stairs. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. She nodded but said nothing, her throat tight, her hands pressed against her empty stomach. He sighed, his chest heavy. "You should not be here alone," he said. But she only stared at him, silent, like a stray animal not knowing if it could trust. Behind them the market noise returned. Vendors shouted again, coins clinked. Life moved forward as if nothing had happened. But Daniel knew something had changed. The way people looked at him had shifted, and the way this girl now stood close to him felt like the beginning of something heavier. He had defended her when nobody else would, and he knew deep inside that this choice would not be forgotten by the crowd, nor by the girl whose life he had just touched. That night Daniel could not sleep easily. The market voices still echoed in his head, the shouts, the laughter, the accusing words. He lay on his old bed staring at the cracked ceiling, asking himself why he had spoken up. He knew the answer. He had seen the girl's eyes, those frightened eyes that begged for someone to believe her. He could not stand silent. But now he wondered what price he had to pay. Morning came. And when he walked to the market again for work, people looked at him differently. Some turned their faces away, others whispered to each other, and a few laughed when he passed. He felt the weight of their judgment pressing on his shoulders. At the corner stall, the vendor who had grabbed the alien girl stood with his arms crossed, his voice loud enough for Daniel to hear. There goes the alien's friend, the man who defends thieves. His words drew chuckles from other vendors. Daniel pretended not to hear, but the sting was deep. The day dragged on. The smell of smoke from the food stalls made Daniel hungry, but his thoughts kept circling back to the girl. Was she safe? Where did she go after he left her? Was she hiding, or was she wandering the streets with nothing to eat? By evening, the market grew quieter. Shadows stretched long. Lanterns were lit one by one. Daniel cleaned his tools, ready to leave. But a strange feeling made him turn. There she was, the same alien girl standing at the edge of the street, her head low, her hands held close to her chest. She had followed him again. Daniel frowned. "Why are you here?" he asked. But she did not reply, she just stared at him, those silver eyes glimmering in the dim light. People nearby noticed. Whispers rose again. "She is still with him, see. The thief has found her master," one man said. Another spat on the ground. "Better be careful, human. She will take from your pockets too." Daniel clenched his fists but kept his calm. "Leave her alone," he said firmly. "She has done nothing wrong." But his words fell into laughter and scorn. The alien girl stepped closer, standing behind him as if seeking shelter, her small frame trembling. Daniel realized she trusted him, perhaps more than she trusted anyone else in the world. He sighed, speaking gently to her. "Do you have a place to go?" She shook her head slowly. "Do you have family?" Another shake. Her lips pressed tight. Daniel felt a sharp pang in his chest. She had nothing. Not even a name spoken in the crowd. Just a shadow lost in the city. The crowd around grew restless, their voices sharp. "Why keep her? Send her away. She will only bring trouble," some shouted. Others laughed cruelly. "Maybe she is your pet now, human." Daniel looked at them all, his jaw tight. "You judge her because she is different, because she is weak, but none of you has proof of her crime. Not one of you saw her steal." Silence fell for a heartbeat. Then the vendor barked. "We don't need proof. We know her kind. Liars, thieves, beggars, they always take." Daniel raised his voice, his anger pushing through. "No. What you know is your hate, and what you fear is her hunger." The girl's hands gripped the edge of his shirt as if she was afraid he might leave her. Daniel stood still, feeling the weight of her trust in the sharp eyes of the people. Finally, the crowd began to break apart, muttering curses, but none dared to challenge him further. They left with shaking heads, their whispers filling the street. When the last of them were gone, Daniel looked down at the girl. "You should not follow me," he said softly. "It will make things harder for both of us." Her voice came at last, soft like wind. "You saved me," she whispered. "I cannot leave you." Daniel froze, the words simple, but heavy. He saw her eyes full of loyalty born from desperation. She would not walk away. Not after what he had done. He felt torn. His life had been simple, quiet, unnoticed. But now he was the center of unwanted attention. He knew protecting her would bring more anger from the town, yet looking at her small, shaking figure, he could not push her away. "Come," he finally said, his voice tired but gentle. "I will give you food, at least for tonight." The girl nodded, a faint light of hope crossing her face. She stayed close as he walked, each step echoing louder in his mind. He knew his choice had set a path, one he could not turn back from. Behind them, the market lay in shadows, whispers already spreading from one stall to another. But in that quiet night street, one alien girl walked beside one human, and their bond, fragile but unbroken, had begun to grow. The streets were quiet that night. The lamps burned low, and the air carried the faint smell of smoke and dust. Daniel walked with heavy steps, his bag of tools on one shoulder, his mind still restless from the market. He could feel eyes watching him, not from the crowd now, but from the small figure trailing just behind. The alien girl followed at a distance, her steps soft, almost soundless, like a shadow slipping through the narrow alleys. Whenever Daniel glanced back, she froze, lowering her gaze. But when he turned forward, he felt her presence again. He sighed, tired from the long day. "Why are you following me?" he asked without looking back, his voice carrying through the empty street. There was no answer, only the sound of her footsteps quickening. To keep up, Daniel slowed, waiting until she came closer. Now the light from a broken lantern fell across her face. Her eyes glimmered faint silver. Her skin looked even paler under the night sky. She held herself small, like someone afraid of being noticed. "You cannot stay on the streets like this," Daniel said, "but you cannot follow me forever either." Still, she did not speak, her lips pressed shut. Only her hands trembled as they clutched the fabric of her torn clothes. The silence stretched, broken only by the distant barking of dogs and the wind rattling the market signs. Daniel rubbed his forehead, wondering what to do. He did not want her near his home, not because of her, but because of the neighbors. If they saw her with him, more rumors would spread. Yet when he looked at her thin frame, he could not imagine leaving her out in the cold. She was too young, too fragile. She would not last the night alone. Finally, he said, "You can stay in the shed behind my house, just for tonight." His voice was firm but soft. The girl's eyes widened slightly. Surprise flashing across her face, she nodded quickly, almost desperately. When they reached his small house, Daniel led her to the back. The shed was old, filled with tools and spare parts. The air smelled of rust and wood. "It is not much," he said, "but it is shelter." She stepped inside quietly, touching nothing, only looking around with cautious eyes. Daniel gave her a blanket he rarely used. She held it close, her fingers brushing the fabric as if it was treasure. "Thank you," she whispered, the first clear words he had heard from her that night. He nodded, turning to leave, but then paused. "Why me?" he asked. "Why do you keep following me?" She hesitated, her lips trembling. Finally she said, "Because you believed me. No one else did." The word struck him deeper than he expected. He had defended her without thinking, but to her it meant everything. He realized then that she was tied to him now, bound not by chains, but by the memory of a single kindness. The next morning the town was already awake. Daniel stepped outside to fetch water, but whispers drifted across the street. Neighbors glanced his way, their eyes narrowing. Some pointed at the shed behind his house, suspicion clear. By midday the rumors spread faster. Some said the alien thief lived with him now. Others claimed he was hiding her crimes. Laughter and mocking words filled the market. Daniel ignored them, but the girl stayed inside, too afraid to step out. That evening, when Daniel returned, he found her sitting on the floor of the shed, hugging her knees. Her eyes followed him. Like a lost child waiting for a parent, he placed a small loaf of bread beside her. "Eat," he said simply. She nodded and tore into it, crumbs falling across her lap. Watching her eat, Daniel felt both sadness and anger. Sadness at her hunger. Anger at the way the world had branded her without proof. He wondered how long she had lived like this, hiding, begging, accused at every corner. "Do you have a name?" he asked quietly. She froze, then nodded. "Lyra," she whispered, her voice barely more than air. Daniel repeated it softly. "Lyra." The name felt strange but gentle on his tongue. She looked at him with cautious hope, as if hearing her name spoken kindly for the first time in years. From that moment, the bond deepened, though unspoken. She trusted him more. She followed him not only in the streets but in spirit, a silent presence that clung to him. Night came again, and as Daniel lay in his bed, he heard faint movement outside. He looked through the small window, and there she was, curled up under the blanket in the shed, the dim light catching her silver eyes. Awake, watching the stars, Daniel turned away, his chest heavy with thoughts. He knew the days ahead would not be easy. The town would not forgive his choice, and the girl would never leave his side, her silence louder than any words. In that quiet night, the bond between them grew stronger, unbreakable. She was the silent follower, but in truth, Daniel realized, he was also following her, into a future neither of them had expected. The morning was cold, mist clung to the streets, and the small shed behind Daniel's house smelled of damp wood. Daniel stepped outside carrying a tin cup of water. His eyes drifted to the shed. He wondered if the girl, Lyra, was still inside. When he pushed the door open, he found her sitting on the floor, her knees pulled tight to her chest, the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her silver eyes blinked at the sudden light. "You should eat something," Daniel said gently. He placed a small loaf of bread on the floor. Lyra's hands trembled. As she reached for it, she tore it apart quickly, stuffing pieces into her mouth, crumbs falling onto her lap. Daniel watched in silence. The speed of her eating revealed more than her words. She was starving, not just hungry from a skipped meal, but starving like someone who had gone too many days with nothing. When she finished, she looked down, ashamed of the way she had eaten. Daniel crouched beside her, his voice calm. "It's all right. You don't have to hide it." Lyra's lips pressed together, her eyes watered. Finally, she whispered, "I was hungry, too hungry. They call me thief, but I only wanted to live." Daniel felt his chest tighten. Her words were broken but clear. She was not lying. He had seen liars before in the market, but her voice carried truth and pain. "Where is your family?" Daniel asked softly. Lyra shook her head. "Gone," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I don't know where. I don't know if alive. I was left. I was alone." Daniel lowered his eyes. He knew loss, but the kind of loneliness she described was worse. She had no one to trust, no one to protect her, no one even to speak her name until yesterday. She continued, her voice trembling. "I tried to beg. No one listened. I tried to work. No one let me. I tried to ask for food. They threw stones. They called me liar, thief, animal." Her small hands clenched the blanket as if it were the only thing keeping her together. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. Anger burned inside him, not at her, but at the people who had pushed her this far. "You are not an animal," he said firmly. "You are just hungry, and hunger is no crime." Lyra stared at him, her lips trembling. Then, for the first time since they met, she let out a soft sob, the sound of a child who had held back tears for too long. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, unsure if she would pull away, but she stayed still, shaking quietly, her tears soaking into the old blanket. Hours passed and Daniel went about his chores, fixing broken tools, cleaning, but his mind stayed with her. The image of her eating so desperately, the sound of her voice when she admitted her pain, it echoed in his heart. That afternoon he brought her a small bowl of stew. She held it carefully, blowing on it as if afraid it might vanish if she moved too quickly. "Why do you help me?" she asked suddenly, her eyes searching his face. Daniel paused, then answered, "Because no one else would." His words were simple but heavy. Lyra stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly, her voice soft. "Then I will not leave." He wanted to argue, to tell her that staying with him would bring danger. But when he saw her fragile frame and the hope in her eyes, he could not push her away. Instead, he said, "We will see." Though deep inside, he already knew she meant it. That evening, Daniel stepped into the market again. Whispers rose the moment he appeared. People eyed him coldly. Some sneered. "There is the alien's friend," one man muttered. "He feeds thieves now." Another said loudly. Laughter followed. Daniel ignored them, but his jaw tightened. He bought bread, dried meat, and left quickly. He could feel their eyes burning into his back. When he returned home, Lyra was waiting in the shed. Her face lit up when she saw the food. She ate slowly this time, trying to be polite, though her hunger was clear. Daniel sat nearby watching her. He spoke after a long pause. "Lyra, if you stay with me, it will not be easy. People will hate it, they already do." She swallowed the last bite of bread, her voice quiet but strong. "I don't care," she said. "I only care you believe me." The words hit Daniel harder than the market's hate. He looked at her, seeing not just a hungry child, but a soul desperate for trust, desperate for someone to stand beside her. Night fell. The shed was quiet. Daniel returned to his bed, but he could not sleep. He thought of Lyra curled under the blanket, thought of her voice when she said she had no one. He realized then that his small act of kindness had grown into something larger. She was not just an alien girl accused of stealing. She was now part of his life. And whether he wanted it or not, their paths had become one. The next morning the market was alive with noise again. Vendors shouted their prices, children ran through the alleys, and the smell of bread filled the air. But under the noise there was tension. People whispered when Daniel walked past. Their eyes followed him, sharp and cold. He carried his tool bag as always, his steps steady, but inside he felt the weight of every stare. The news had spread. Everyone knew now. They said he was hiding the alien thief in his house. At the fruit stall, the same vendor who had accused Lyra crossed his arms and spat on the ground. "Here, he comes," he said loudly, making sure all could hear. "The friend of thieves, the human who chooses aliens over his own people." Laughter followed. Daniel ignored it at first, but the words kept coming. "Maybe she is stealing for him. Now," someone muttered. "Maybe he plans to marry her kind." Another joked cruelly. The crowd burst into harsh laughter. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. He bought the things he needed and turned to leave. Yet the whispers trailed him like shadows. When he reached home, he found Lyra waiting. In the shed, her silver eyes anxious. "They hate you now," she said softly, her voice heavy with guilt. "Because of me." Daniel placed the bag down. "It's not your fault," he replied firmly. "They hated you before. Now they just hate me too." Lyra lowered her head, her hands clutching the blanket. She wanted to believe him, but the fear in her eyes showed she knew the danger. That evening, as Daniel walked back through the market, the whispers grew louder. This time they did not. "Stay whispers," one man stepped forward, his face red with anger. "We don't want her here," he shouted. "Send her away. She is a curse." Others joined. "Yes. Throw her out. She will ruin us all. She will take from us until nothing is left." Daniel stood still, his voice calm but strong. "She has done nothing wrong. She is just hungry." But his words met with laughter and jeers. "Hungry?" the vendor barked. "You think hunger makes her innocent? No, it makes her dangerous, desperate. She will betray you. She will betray us all." The crowd grew bolder. Some stepped closer, their voices sharp. "If you protect her, you are no better than her," one woman shouted. "You are a traitor to your own." Daniel's heart pounded, but he did not step back. "If kindness makes me a traitor, then so be it," he said, his voice echoing across the square. The crowd fell into stunned silence for a moment. Then the anger returned twice as loud. Some threw rotten fruit at his feet, others cursed him. But Daniel stood his ground. When he finally returned home, his clothes stained, Lyra was waiting, her eyes wide with fear. "Why do you suffer for me?" she whispered. "Why not let me go?" Daniel looked at her, tired but firm. "Because if I let you go, they will destroy you, and I will not let that happen." Her lips trembled. Tears filled her eyes. She covered her face with her hands, but her voice came through broken and clear. "Then I will stay with you, no matter what happens." Days passed, and the anger in the village only grew. Fewer people spoke to Daniel. Some refused to buy his work. His income grew thin, his nights restless. But every time he thought of sending Lyra away, he saw her silver eyes full of trust, and he knew he could not. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Daniel heard footsteps outside. Voices gathered near his house, angry voices. "We warned you," someone shouted. "Choose us or choose her. But you cannot have both." Daniel opened the door, standing firm. "I have already chosen," he said, his words steady, "and I will not abandon her." The crowd hissed, their faces twisted with rage, but none dared to cross the threshold. They left muttering threats, the air heavy with their hate. Lyra stood behind him, her small hands gripping his sleeve, her voice shaking. "They will never forgive you." Daniel looked down at her, then out at the empty street. "I don't need their forgiveness," he said. "I just need to know I did what was right." That night the village was quiet, but Daniel knew it was not peace. It was the silence before a storm. He lay awake listening to the wind. Lyra curled in the shed, her breathing soft, and he wondered how long they could stand against the anger of so many. Still, he had made his choice, and Lyra, once accused as a thief, now clung to him with all her fragile strength. They were outcasts together. But in that bond there was something stronger than hate, something the village could not break. The days grew heavier for Daniel. The whispers of the village turned into sharp words, then into cold silence. No one wanted his work. Few would look him in the eye. He was marked as the man who sheltered the alien thief. Yet in his small shed, Lyra stayed close, her silver eyes watching him whenever he left. She ate little. She spoke softly, but she never left his side. Her presence had become as steady as the beating of his own heart. One night, while Daniel was returning home late from repairing a broken machine on the far side of the town, he heard shouts from the market, the kind of shouts filled not with anger, but with fear. "Stop them," a man yelled. "They're taking everything." Daniel ran toward the sound, his boots striking the cobblestones. When he reached the market, he saw 3 figures darting through the shadows, their arms filled with sacks of food and cloth. They moved fast, skilled, practiced. Vendors cried out, chasing them, but the thieves disappeared into the alleys like smoke. The people shouted louder. "It's the alien girl again, she's stealing again." Daniel froze. His breath caught. He knew Lyra was at home, hiding in the shed, too scared to step out. Yet the crowd shouted her name like a curse. "The alien thief, it must be her." "No," Daniel shouted, his voice breaking through. "She is not here, she is not the one." But no one listened. The next morning, when Daniel entered the market, people pointed fingers. "Your pet is stealing from us," they accused. "You defend her, but she is robbing us all." Daniel clenched his fists. "I saw them," he said, his voice sharp. 3 men, not her, she was at my home." The crowd laughed, cruel and bitter. "Of course you will say that, you hide her, you cover for her, you lie for her." His anger boiled, but he held it back. "Show me proof," he demanded. "Show me her stealing, not your words," but proof never came. Only suspicion. That night Daniel decided to find the truth himself. He walked the alleys where the thieves had run. The ground showed faint tracks, heavier than Lyra's light steps, footprints of boots, not bare feet. He followed them deeper into the dark side of the town. At last he reached an abandoned storehouse, broken windows covered in dust. Faint candlelight flickered inside. Daniel crept closer, pressing against the wall. Through a crack he saw them, 3 men laughing, spilling stolen apples onto the floor. One pulled out coins taken from a frightened vendor. Daniel's heart pounded, anger mixed with relief. The truth was here. These men were the real thieves, not Lyra. Never Lyra. He stepped back into the shadows, planning what to do. But a hand grabbed his shoulder. He spun around. One of the thieves had slipped outside, their eyes locked. Well, the man sneered. "The alien lover spying on us." The others rushed out, circling him. Daniel's fists tightened. "You frame a starving child for your crimes," he growled. "You let them curse her, name while you take everything." The leader laughed, cruel and cold. "Why not? No one trusts her. She's the perfect shadow while we take and take." Daniel lunged, striking one, but they were 3. Fists and kicks rained on him. He fought back, his knuckles bleeding until lanterns flared and voices shouted. The villagers had followed. Drawn by the noise, they stopped at the sight. Daniel on the ground, the 3 thieves over him, sacks of stolen goods spilling open. For a moment silence hung, then a woman gasped. It wasn't the alien, it was them. The crowd rushed forward, grabbing the thieves, pulling them back. The vendor who had once shouted the loudest against Lyra now stood pale. Shame flooding his face, Daniel rose slowly, bruised but standing, his voice hoarse. "You accused her again and again, but you never saw the truth. You chose hate over eyes, suspicion over proof." The people lowered their heads. Some muttered apologies, but Daniel knew words could not erase the pain. When he returned home that night, Lyra waited at the shed door, her silver eyes wide with worry. "You're hurt," she whispered, rushing to his side. Daniel smiled faintly through the bruises. "But the truth is out now. They know you are innocent." Her lips trembled, tears forming. "They will believe me now?" she asked softly, as if afraid the answer was no. Daniel touched her shoulder gently. "Maybe not all at once, but they will have no choice. The real thieves are caught." She stared at him, then wrapped the blanket tighter around herself, her voice barely a whisper. "You fought for me again." Daniel looked into her eyes, shining with fragile hope, and felt the bond between them grow deeper, unshakable now, for he had defended her not once but twice against the world and its lies. The night outside was quiet, but inside his small home something louder grew, a bond of trust forged in hunger, pain, and truth, a bond no anger could break. The village was different after the night of the thieves. People spoke less when Daniel passed, some kept their heads low. Others glanced at him with uneasy eyes, shame mixed with silence, for the truth had been seen. The real criminals had been caught, but though the truth was out, the scars remained. Lyra was still the alien girl once called a thief. The whispers had not died completely. Some still muttered when she walked near. Some still turned their backs. Daniel knew trust could not be rebuilt in a day, yet he also knew he had no regret. He looked at Lyra and saw more than an accusation. He saw strength in her quietness, loyalty, in her silver eyes, and hope where once there had only been fear. Each morning she followed him, no longer hiding in shadows but walking at his side, her small steps steady, her head a little higher. When people stared, she stayed close, gripping the edge of his sleeve, a silent message that she would not leave. Daniel worked as always, fixing tools, carrying supplies. Though fewer customers came, he accepted the cost, because each evening when he returned, Lyra was there, waiting, her face lighting up at the sight of him, as if he had returned from a great journey. One afternoon while they sat outside the shed, she looked at him carefully, her voice soft. "You saved me twice, when no one else would. I cannot repay this." Daniel shook his head. "You don't need to repay kindness," he said gently. "Just live, that is enough." Her lips trembled, tears forming. "Then I will live only beside you," she whispered. "I will not leave your side, not ever." Daniel felt the words settle deep inside, heavier than any vow. She was not just saying them, she meant them. Her loyalty was not from duty, but from the bond they had built, forged in hunger and defended in fire. Days turned to weeks, and slowly the anger of the village softened. Not all hearts changed, but some eyes grew kinder. Children who once threw stones now only watched curiously. A few neighbors even nodded to Daniel when he passed, small signs but real. Yet Daniel knew the bond between him and Lyra did not depend on the village. It depended only on them. He had chosen her when the world turned away, and she had chosen him when she had no one left. One evening, as the sun sank and the sky burned red, Lyra stood at the edge of the field behind the house, her blanket wrapped tight. She looked at the horizon, and then at Daniel. "Do you think I will ever belong here?" she asked, her voice fragile. Daniel stepped beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "You already belong," he said. "Not because of them, but because you are with me." Her silver eyes shimmered. A small smile touched her lips, the first true smile he had seen from her. That night, as they sat by the small fire in the shed, Daniel thought of the journey, the first time he had seen her accused, the way she had followed him silently, the way she had revealed her hunger, the way the village had turned on them both, and finally, the night the real thieves were caught. He realized the story was not just about defending her, it was about finding something he never expected, a bond deeper than blood, a trust stronger than fear. Lyra curled near the fire, her voice quiet. "They can call me thief forever. I don't care. Because you saw me as more. You gave me a name. Again, you gave me life again." Daniel looked at her, his voice steady. "And you gave me purpose again. You reminded me that standing alone for what is right is better than standing with many for what is wrong." Silence filled the shed, but it was a warm silence, a silence that carried peace instead of fear. Outside, the village slept. The anger dimmed, the whispers fading slowly. But in that small shed behind a simple house, something far stronger grew. The bond between a human and an alien once called a thief. A bond born in hunger, strengthened in fire, and sealed in loyalty. Bond that would not break, no matter what the world said, no matter how many turned against them, because they had already chosen each other. And in that choice they had found a home.